I'm Jamie. I'm Jamie Korf. I live in a suburb just outside of Minneapolis, Minnesota, and I'm
Awesome.
excited to be featured on the Coley project.
And you heard about it through a friend on social media,
I
correct?
did. Yeah, it was just very word of mouth and it was very nebulous. It was like, there's this thing that's happening. I think it's covering sibling loss. I thought you might be interested here. I think she gave me your email address. So then I don't know, I was just instantly intrigued and captivated because it's, as you know, and why this project was born is it's such a forgotten type of loss. So it really resonated with me. So that's why I reached out, and I'm really looking forward to sharing my story and hopefully touching others and being touched by the stories of others as well.
Yeah. Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, I guess then yeah, we'll jump in with if you want to go ahead and just first talk about like who was your sibling, like what was your dynamic like, talk them up.
So he was my little brother. And if anyone out there with a little brother knows, it's like they are referred to eternally as your baby brother, even if they're in their 30s. So he was my baby brother. And there was a bit of an age gap between us. But his name was Aaron Michael Christensen. And he was born in 1990. So I was already like 6.5 when he was born. And so the dynamic started as very much like I was my mom's helper and I changed his poopy diapers and I would get yelled at if I were gagging. So I got schooled pretty early on and desensitized to a lot of that stuff, but he was just like, he was a really chill baby. But of course, not only I feel like girls are more mature than boys, physically, emotionally, all that, but so that I feel like when he started to get older, it's just our paths were always like this. They were never like that really until the end, tragically. So he kind of had a different life than I did. By the time that I moved out of the house, he was in high school, he was in the country, I was raised in the city. And so we just had very different experiences of our parents and living with our parents. And I'm always kind of racked with guilt because it's I just constantly replay moments of our childhood together where I was just such an a-hole, like he was like the annoying little brother and I had my friends over and he wanted to hang out with us and I'd be like, go play, go find something else to do, and so a note to those out there that have siblings, like even if it's too late and you're not, just include them or tell them that you're sorry for not including them, because I never really did that. I mean, of course I included him, but he was like the little baby annoyance, and it was never mean. It was just kind of like, I wanted to hang out with my friends and do high school things, and I didn't want him to hear certain things. And so anyways, but as we got older and he, was in high school and then in college, we would talk on the phone, and he was just a jokester and a half. I mean, he would always get his idioms messed up. Like that's one of his legacies. Like I told him a concern that I had about something one time, and I'll never forget him telling me it was just water he's like, it's just water under the fridge, sis. It's not a big deal. So he was funny even when he didn't try. Like he was just a clown. Like he had just the best sense of humor. Always found a way to make people smile. And he was one of those people where he'd enter a room and just make everyone feel acknowledged or heard when he talked to them. Like I just feel like that's such an underrated gift to have. People want to be heard, and sometimes just lending an ear can be a game changer for some people, and he just had a knack for that. And so he had a lot of friends, and he had a lot of friends of friends, and he was just pretty well known in the Duluth, Two Harbors area, which is pretty north from here. And yeah, so we just kind of had our, we led our separate lives. When I was in college, he was in middle school going into high school. And we didn't fight or anything. We just didn't have anything to talk about for a long time, and it's always like, it was just, ugh, my baby brother, ugh, my little brother, and he'd be like, ugh, my big sister. um, and yeah, that all started to change probably sadly, a year or two before he died. He was a huge partier, like rager, but like a fun guy when he'd party, so it wasn't like it was a problematic thing. But I was just kind of, you do that in your 20s and then you're just kind of over it. And so I was kind of past that. And he settled down with a girl. It was like his first girlfriend. He was 27 or 28, and she's super sweet. We still keep in touch with her. She's a teacher. And they had big plans of having a big family, and they had just signed on for a house the weekend before he passed away, which is just like the shittiest of shitty timing, right? Like the universe is just kind of an asshole sometimes. Can I swear on this?
Yeah,
that's just how I talk. I mean,
it's not like this is going to be like, it's not like the aim is we're going to show this to first graders and first graders.
Right.
So no. Bad
words are good. I mean, they're so therapeutic, especially when you're going through some tragedy in life. Like, man, does the occasional F-bomb just like, it's like the Maslow's hierarchy of needs. It's just a fulfiller. Anyways, I am going off topic, but no, he was great. We were as opposite as it gets, of course, because like I said, there was the age difference. There was kind of the separation between his existence under my parents and my existence. Like, I was the responsible one, and he was kind of babied for a long time. And he was really into dirt biking, was a huge thing. And another regret that I have, and I say this not to like garner pity or sympathy, is like, if you have a sibling that has some type of a hobby or side hustle, like support them. You don't have to go in 120%, but like, go to the game, or give them a call and wish them well, or like donate your time or money to a project or a business that they're starting. Just, you can't go back. And I wish I could go back, because there were so many times where the dirt biking thing again, and I'm such a girly girl. I'm like, I am not going to like a dirt/dust bowl demolition dirt. Like, no, I went one time and I wore heels. I was 22, so I like my prefrontal cortex wasn't fully developed.
Forgivable. Yeah.
Thank you. But so, I feel good that I at least went to one of his meets or competitions, but man, he had so many, and he had all these trophies, he's always finishing in one of the top places. And it meant so much to him. I wish I would have gone to more, and sometimes life gets in the way and you just can't, but I probably could have. And so you just don't want to be like me, ruminating over that, because there's nothing that can be done about it. And it sucks. But, that was a major thing for him, that like he had a need for speed, like big time adrenaline junkie. And yeah, he was also an outdoors guy. He loved to go fishing with my dad. Like, that was their thing, was fishing. Wasn't much for deer hunting, because my dad could never get him out of bed. Like, the deer are like, they're like prevalent, like they're rampant at like, the wee hours of the morning. And my brother didn't want to wake up until like 11 or noon. And my dad's like, well, that's done before it even started. But it was the thought that counted. And he would still like trudge over to, my dad's deer stand and hang out with him and whatnot. But yeah, he was lovely. He was so lovely. And he had the best laugh. Like he just had this kind of old man chuckle, but sometimes it would be kind of like high pitched, like I can't I can't reenact it, but I can hear it. Like if I just like I can trigger it and I can hear it instantly in my head. And I hope it stays like that, because I feel like with the passing of time, things start to kind of fade out a little bit, and you have to look at pictures or a video. And even then it's just, the more that time passes, it feels so distanced. Yeah. And out of reach. And thank God for like modern technology, because man, I mean, I just feel for people that only have like print photos to contend with, and we have the advantage of having video or audio or live photos. And that's a lovely thing. And so I guess he died in 2019. It was in the summer. And like the cruel thing is, and tragedy changes you in so many ways, but man, I was just so slighted at the fact that he died on a beautiful summery day in like broad daylight. Like it just like blows my mind. Of course that's always happened, but for some reason you associate death with darkness or nighttime, and not only was it abrupt and unforeseen, but it was in the middle of this beautiful summery day. And anyone that lives in Minnesota or the Midwest in general, like they will tell you how treasured those beautiful summery days are, because we don't get a lot of them. It's just a very finite chunk of time over the course of, the 4 seasons. It's not even 4 seasons, it's like winter and summer. And then we joke about construction being a season over here. I don't know about you guys, but
yes.
But yeah, I don't know if you want me to go into depth about it. I'm fine with doing that. I don't know if that would be kind of a trigger for some people, but I can kind of recount that time, like that very specific point in time.
No, I think that would be good, because people can always, I think that's the nice thing about video. People can fast forward if they're like at a point in their grieving, like, oh, I don't want to hear that. So I think for some people it can be very helpful to hear about. So yeah.
Sure. So trigger warning for the for what's to come. But yeah, oh man, I remember my husband and I were going to go out on a date. We were going to go out for like a early dinner / late lunch, and I was in the bathroom getting ready, and then I heard just this really puzzling sound from outside the door. And it was inaudible, or not inaudible. It was indiscernible, but it was loud. Like it almost sounded like a bear growling. And I thought, what in the actual hell? And I opened the door, and my husband was standing there sobbing on the phone. And I looked at him, and, I just instantly, my heart dropped in my stomach. It sank. And I'm like practically shaking his shoulders, trying to like figure out what's going on, because he could not articulate. Like it's like everything. It's like, those dreams where you can't scream and you try. I think that's what had happened. He just went completely numb, and so the poor guy is like numb and catatonic, and I'm like screaming at him, like, what is wrong? And so I grab the phone, I just snatch it out of his hands, and it's my dad, and he's, just completely beside himself. So what happened was, my brother had just gotten a motorcycle, like literally 2 weeks before all of this. And my parents live way the hell up north. I mean, they are in BFE. And so he went up there. He thought I was going to be up there for the weekend, which kind of haunts me. I've had enough people try to talk me out of that mindset, like, oh, if I hadn't gone, then he wouldn't have gone and he'd still be here. Which I understand is just, it's not a productive way to process things. So anyways, he had gone up north on his motorcycle. And just for context, I live right outside of the Twin Cities. My parents live 4 hours north. So there's a lot of like country roads that you obviously have to traverse to get to their house. And he lived up north, so he was like an hour away from them at the time. And yeah, I talked to him on the phone like 2 hours before he died, and I remember walking in the Skyway and I'm at work and teasing him about his girlfriend and, oh, you guys love each other so much, don't you? You said I love you yet? And he's like, shut up, Jamie. That was just kind of our dynamic, because he was just so fun to tease. He was like, he would just take it like a champ. And I was teasing him, and he said he had gone to my parents thinking that I was going to be there. Well, I was supposed to be there, but my mom discouraged me from going because she was feeling sick and I was going to Portugal in the coming week and she didn't want me and my husband to get sick. So she told me to stay back. So he went there and he had burgers with them. They grilled together. They had a lovely time. And then he headed home to be with his girlfriend, Marissa. And they, I think there's a statistic out there that points to this, but he crashed within 10 minutes of my parents' place. Like, don't they always say that it's closer to home?
Yeah.
Yeah. And like the horse flies are so bad up there. And this was like a particular nasty bout that area got, where it was like almost like suffocating. Like it was so bad, like locust. And a deer jumped out trying to, I'm sure trying to get away from it. And it was at the exact time that my brother was in that spot crossing, and that was it. And it happened really fast. And I try to tell myself that he didn't know what was happening because it happened so fast. And they do say that it was like, at the time of impact, like everything probably just went to black, which is like, to me, a comforting thought versus him, potentially lying there asking for help. But it happened so fast and with such force, he didn't have a chance, according to the autopsy report. So there was someone that knew him, a friend of his, that drove by within like a minute or two of it happening. And, the ambulance was there, and then my parents came, and unfortunately they saw, things. And I try, PTSD. I understand, like, I never want to distill that. It's such an important thing. And unfortunately, it's become like a part of our vernacular, just like narcissism, everyone's a narcissist.
Yeah.
And everyone has PTSD. And, I don't want to like lessen that for the people that actually do. And so I always try to be sensitive about this, but just the thought of that happening is like, that is such a trigger sometimes. It's gotten better with time for me, but man, that can just take you to such a dark place. And again, there's nothing productive about it, but when you are in the throes of grief, like I mean, I'm someone, like, I'm a journalist, so I'm very curious and I'm always examining and cross-examining. And I thought, if I could go to the darkest parts of this incident, then it will make me better. And it doesn't. There's no magic pill. There's no cure for grief. There's no cure. I'm sure like the impacts lessen, over time, but it goes away, and so it was torture. But I thought, well, it was almost like a very like distant cousin from PTSD or from survivor's guilt. Like, if my parents had to witness that, then I had to picture it in my head. Mm-hmm. In your brain, as you know, Colleen, like, it just does so many weird ass things when you're in the thick of grief. Like, I'm still illogical. He died, it'll be 4 years, June 7th. And like, I will still call him. And I know he's not going to answer his phone. I know it's going to, but I don't even know what it does for me, but I do it. Maybe it's just like the act of it makes him feel alive to me for even a second. I'm not really sure. But he died, and I'm somebody who is actually like, I am like such a spaz. We talked about ADHD, like, my doctor actually was just like, I think that you would probably hit all the marks. And so I'm going to refer you out to to a psychologist. And I'm like, thank you. Because I feel like I've been dealing with it my whole life. And sometimes it works in your favor and sometimes it doesn't. But for whatever reason, when it comes to tragedy or emergency or like crisis situations, I am like the person that just does the thing. I find a way to compartmentalize everything and I just act. And it's like, okay, what do we need to do here? And so I didn't even give myself really a chance to process. I just jumped in the car and my husband's like, you should not be driving. And I'm like, you are right. So he drove. I put like a quick, bag together of stuff, not knowing how long I was going to be up there. And it was like just a very torturous 4-hour car ride. We stopped at a gas station and I threw up and, it was, and I called my parents every 10 minutes. Are you okay? Are you okay? Are you okay? Because, we're not a perfect family. No family is. We're very flawed. We had, some dark times growing up, but ultimately, like we were like a pretty normal fam by most accounts, like I knew I was loved. Aaron knew he was loved. We had fun together. And so I was just like, I was so concerned that my parents were going to die. Like either it would be them initiating it or it would just happen, like a natural, some type of, heart attack, cardiac arrest. I don't know. So I kept calling them, are you okay? And they're like, no, we're not okay. And I mean, I knew that they weren't, but there was something about constantly checking in with them and just hearing their voices to know that they were still there. Like, just wait for me to get there. Please just wait for me to get there. And I got there and we threw our arms around each other, the three of us, and we just screamed and cried. And it was so sad in the moment, but looking back, like it was one of the few moments in this whole experience where I felt like we were all grieving in a very harmonious way, if that makes any sense. Because after that, it was all about them and everyone was concerned about them. And that's completely understandable. Now I have a kid of my own. I don't know if I could survive that. But, as a sibling, you don't come till later. And if you do at all. So it was, again, it was sad in the moment, it's like our knees buckled, we were holding each other and fell and screaming and crying, but it was just, it was therapeutic and it felt like we were all one for a moment. And then after that, it's like, we went into action and my poor dad, my mom was so beside herself. My dad had to do, and this is such a cruel thing for grievers, and this is why there are certain resources that exist out there. Like, there's the whole estate thing and there's the probate attorney and there's the closing of the accounts and the, informing the employer of this person's passing. And it's so sick, like it finalizes things for you. It makes it feel so transactional and it's just not fair. So if for any of you out there, if you have a loved one or a dear friend who's going through this, like just jump in, close the Facebook accounts if they need to, contact the probate attorney, all that stuff, like just jump in. It was lovely. We had people coming and dropping off all this food, and it's great because no one wants to think about making food. I remember going to the store and being like, I have to fucking buy toilet paper and my brother is dead. Like, this is so stupid. Just these like the minutia of life. It just does not add up when you've been through such a mind F. It's just like, what? But I will say it's nice to have that food, but also when you're grieving, I can't speak for everyone. For us, nobody wanted to eat. Like there is no appetite. You have to really force yourself to just be like very conscious. Like, okay, I haven't eaten in 7 hours. I should probably have an apple,
Yeah. I was just saying, I had an appetite for vodka. I remember that was about
it. Yes. There was quite, well, yeah, I feel like, I didn't really drink because I did. And then I binge drank. It's like, I didn't know my limits and I just went absolutely nuts. But it did feel good because it, you know, it's a drug and it temporarily takes you out of that sharpness that acute grief gives you, or, you know, that you have, or that you're experiencing. So yeah, he died. And I just remember all of these irrational, weird ass thoughts spinning in my head. I'm like, okay, so he's been dead for, you know, and I would do the math in my head, but maybe if he went to, you know, if we took him to a hospital and, you know, maybe they could still resuscitate. It was just, it didn't make any sense. Like he was very dead, but in my mind, I'm like, there might be a chance for somebody could bring him back, you know, or maybe his skin is still warm to the touch, or, you know, maybe his brain is still like doing things. Like it was just so weird, and didn't make sense, but it in a way, it's like you take the back seat to your grief. Like you almost have to surrender to the weirdness and, you know, the haywire thoughts that circulate your brain. And so his funeral was about a week later, and there were like hundreds and hundreds of people there. It was such an outpouring. And again, you know, I don't even think I cried at his funeral because, and maybe this is a common theme with siblings, I felt like I had to be strong for my parents and I couldn't buckle under the weight of all of the sadness. And also I didn't want to go there because I was afraid I would never come out. Like the recesses of grief, I felt like I will die as well. Like in a way, it's like a part of you does die, but it's like you're going into this room where the door is locked and there's no way out. There's no, you know, opening on the bottom of the door. There's no window. There's just, so I always just I just danced around a lot of it. And my parents were so sad. I felt like I had to be some type of equilibrium and just, it's okay. What do you need? Okay, let's do this. And like crack the occasional joke when it was appropriate, just to make them smile a little bit and remember that life is still happening, you know, and wow, look at all of these people that came, and such a testament to your son and how he made people feel. Like that's a beautiful thing. You know, some people don't even get a funeral, and much less have such a strong outpouring from the community. There was like a memorial motorcycle ride and the whole bit. And yeah, it was, and after that is when it just got really quiet, you know, and I'm sure you can attest to that. It's everyone's there in the beginning and then they drop off, and it's not their fault, you know, like it's just life still is going on, but in your mind, it's done, it's ended. And everything else just feels so stupid in comparison. Like I said, buying toilet paper, I'm like, dumb. Getting groceries, dumb. Like paying bills, I'm like, we're all gonna I felt like I got so existential, and I would talk to people on the phone and be like, we're gonna die, you know. Like I wasn't trying to be depressing or morbid. I was just, it's you're so close to death, you can feel it. And so it makes it real for you. And when it's real for you, it's like you just want to take out like an air horn and be like, you know, we're all going to die. Like no one cares about, you know, the gap in your teeth or what you said at the party that one time. Like none of it matters. Nobody cares. You're going to die. And in a way, it's kind of a blessing too, because you are reminded of like the fragility of life. And I'm very, to almost a fault, like hyper vigilant of that. You know, I have death on my mind a lot. I did before. I've always been kind of a worst case scenario person. But I especially do now. And I just feel like with grief, it can either like completely break you. And I've been watching my mom kind of slowly combust over time, or like you channel that into something productive or, you know, great, or I don't know. And I'm not trying to compare. There's of course a lot of gray space in between all of that. So that first year, Colleen, I mean, I didn't have a life. All I did was go to my parents and be with them. And I would just not would try not to crack at any point because I felt like that would be triggering to them. And so I just suppressed everything. Everything was so suppressed. I went to grief groups and it was all older people, not all, but mainly, like, I feel like it was primarily made up of people that had lost a child. And I just didn't really like connect with it. I mean, it was great for my parents, but I just felt like I was floating in the ether. I read a lot of books. There really aren't any for siblings. There's not much out there. Yeah. And maybe that's changed since 2019, 2020. I'm not really, no. Yeah.
I would be doing other things.
Yeah, exactly. But there were so many of these things, Colleen, and I am just interested in hearing your thoughts on this too. Like, so many contradictory feelings and feelings of shame. I remember being like, I'd see messages in my parents' Facebook, or people would call, how are your parents? How are your parents? How are your parents? Tell Mike and Renee that we send them our condolences. Tell Mike and Renee we're thinking of them. Tell Mike and Renee we did a prayer chain, and I was like, what the fuck? Like, I exist. You know what I mean? Like, I experienced, like, this was my baby brother, like, but I felt like I had no grounds to be like, excuse me, what about me? Like, I couldn't. And then I would feel bad about that. Like, I would go from being like, what the hell? Like, am I just invisible to like, shut up. You don't have it as hard as your parents. And I just felt like it was this constant, like, back and forth, like this ping pong going on. And it sucked because your grief is just as valid. It's just different. It's a different grief. Just like their grief is different from each other's. I see my dad and he's thriving and he has like really leaned into his faith, which is not my thing, but it's his thing and it works for him, and he's very like social and he's like out in the community. And my mom has gotten better through the years, but she's very just solitary. Like, she does things alone. She doesn't like to go out. She sees like the bad in things, and she cries a lot. And so I don't know where I was at before that, Colleen, but talking about the different types of grief.
Yeah, everyone kind of does it differently, or yeah.
And I don't feel like I really gave myself permission until the pandemic, and it happened right before the pandemic. And I felt, in a way, and this is another shame thing, I didn't get a chance to properly grieve. For one, I let my parents do all the grieving, and I was just there as the like, some type of monolith support without feelings. And then I felt like in time for me to start really processing and doing grief work, the pandemic happened, and everybody was grieving pieces of our former lives. And that's absolutely fair, but it felt like it just got meshed in with everything else. And so it's not like people forgot about Aaron, but they forgot about maybe the tenderness of grief and how present it still was. And I get it, but I had a lot of moments where I'm like, get over yourself. Like, the world is going to end. Like, like, we're going through a pandemic. We're all going to die. And then also, just like, but what about my brother? What about my brother? What about my brother? So that was really, it's hard to manage. And so I ended up having a kid. I never had the desire to be a mom, really. Like, I was always good with kids, and I took care of Aaron at a young age. Like I said before, he was kind of like my little baby. I was a babysitter and all that, but I just never felt like I had this maternal calling for it. And then one day, I couldn't even tell you where I was, but I just remember thinking to myself, I think I was at work, and I was like, I saw somebody leave this world, and that sucks. Even if it's like better on the other side, like, being alive is such an amazing, beautiful thing. Even in its darkest moments, it's still beautiful. And if I have the great fortune to bring some type of sparkle of life in, then I'm going to do that. And so, yeah, we had a baby boy, and he has forced me to be just present and re-enamored with just the most mundane things, like we were just at Once Upon a Child, which is like a consignment store, and it's got like kid clothes and kid toys, and Ezra, he's 2 years old right now. He's looking around and he keeps yelling, amazing. Like there's nobody. It's just amazing at everything. And I can't ever be in a bad mood. Like he's just so fun to watch. And the other amazing thing is that he talks about Uncle Aaron. Of course, like I've never said in a very blatant way, like Uncle Aaron isn't here. I just talk about him. I've shown him pictures, whatever. I'm not trying to indoctrinate him. It's just like, okay, you've got your Uncle Bobby, you've got your Uncle Brian, you got Uncle Aaron, Mama's brother, and he talks about him like he's still here. And it's amazing. It's amazing. So I feel like you were asking about, like coping, before we jumped on, like you were in terms of coping. I just feel like it's been such a game changer for me, like I said, in a way, I feel like it's my second chance at like, I still am just so guilt ridden with, how he was just my annoying baby brother for a long time, for like a good 6-7 years. And he was just this cute little innocent boy that wanted to like hang out with the grownups, And so this feels like my second chance at like doing it right, like having this baby boy around me and just, I mean, and it's not fair. I'm comparing myself to who I was in like my teens, but again, it's not letting things get under my skin so easily and just taking in the grandiose of even the most minute things. And it's been healing for me. I've done grief groups, I've read grief books, lots of grief articles, lots of grief TED Talks, and they're all super helpful, but there is just something so magical that I never could have predicted. I mean, even when I was like, I'm going to have a baby. And then I found out I was going to have a baby. I was like, oh shit, like, there's no going back. And I wasn't sure how it was going to play out. I thought, oh gosh, what if I'm like a complete nervous, emotional wreck, or, it brings a side out of me that's been untapped this whole time and I screw him up. And luckily, I mean, knock on wood, so far it's been great. It's been so wonderful. And this little boy is just so freaking cute, and he's so perceptive, and he's so in tune with things. And it just feels like the best possible thing to come out of a tragedy, and I feel like it's also, and he's not here put on this earth to heal us. It was just, because that's not fair. And I would never put that on him, but I just can't imagine life without him in it, and I get sad sometimes because, as there's so many like ripples with grief and secondary, grief. And it's those moments where, he could have hung out with Uncle Aaron. Those two would have been best buds, and I grieve that a lot. Like, oh, Uncle Aaron would just laugh his ass off at this, or Uncle Aaron would just like think that, they would just be obsessed with each other. Because he's a goof, just like Aaron, just total, like he's very in tune and perceptive, but he's so funny and understands like humor that 2-year-olds it just goes over like he gets dry humor. Maybe that's what I'm trying to say. I grieve those moments that never happened, and it's just a part of life, And so that's kind of where things are at.
Yeah.
Today.
Well, and then so I guess one thing that popped in my head. So when you lost it, did you have any like friends or anyone that had lost a sibling, or were you kind of like on an island as far as that went?
It's a really good question. No, it was people that had lost maybe like a grandparent or something, but it was never like that. Yeah, just one of my best friends lost her dad about 10 years ago. Otherwise, no. And unfortunately, I had some really close relationships that fractured because they didn't understand, and I couldn't force them to understand. And it just kind of drove a wedge in between us, like I saw things differently because you can never go back to who you were before the loss of your person.
Mm-hmm.
And I felt like I had people that just wanted me to be the same old Jamie, and I just couldn't be that. And then I also don't have any energy to pretend like I don't have it in me to even pretend to be that person. Like, love me or leave me, take it or leave it, and it sucks because that's another part of loss, is that it really, your friendships evolve. Sometimes they devolve completely. I had a friend that I was basically like her fodder for her therapist, and she would report back and tell me what stage of grief I was in. I'm like, what? And of course, Elizabeth, I don't know how you say her name, Kubler.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
It was never supposed to show a linear thing. It was just supposed to, discern the major stages of grief, but it's never like, first you're pissed off and then you're like, oh, this is fine, and then you move on, and so I felt like I kind of had to educate people a lot. And so I didn't know anyone that had a sibling loss, which just kind of added to the isolation. Luckily, my work is amazing. I've been at Minneapolis St. Paul magazine for the past 7 years, and they reached out and they were like, you come back whenever you want. Like, you can be gone for a couple of weeks. You can be gone for a month. Come back when you're ready. And I came back, and man, it's it's so sad to try to, resume life, and you're changed, and everything just feels like it's in slow motion for a long time. I would just sit sometimes and cry quietly at my desk. I would look for Aaron's name with like a little green light on it on Google, see if he was online. And I'd be on Spotify, and, and it just like, it hurt that I would never see like what, it's so dumb and inconsequential, but like, what songs was he listening to? Like that, just proof of life. And it hurt a lot. And there was one time where I was in a meeting room by myself, and I could not get up. And my boss, I had to text her, and she came in, and I was just like beyond inconsolable. It's like everything came to a head. And of course it happened at work. Why wouldn't it?
Yeah.
I love to get attention. And but luckily no one really knew. But she came in and like talked me down, because I was just you have to surrender to grief. It is such an ugly feeling, but it is so necessary if you want to start healing, and when you put it on the back burner like that, like it rears its ugly head, and it comes at times that are completely unexpected and unpredictable. Like, I would be crying at Target or the grocery store, and I wouldn't be able to compose myself. But also, I mean, you just have to let it happen. So
no, well, and I think our, like, just as a culture, I don't know if it's shifting. It seems like maybe it is, but I think we're still not great, and especially Midwest culture. I think we're still not great at like emotions, or like what. It's so just like So I think just sometimes like people being given that space to, I don't know, like I think crying is still very weirdly stigmatized, and really it's just a biological function. Like, it's the way your body is processing. It's no different than but we have a lot more baggage around it. Like, oh, your eyes are leaking,
no, this as soon as possible. Like,
it's like someone can be bleeding out of their head, and people will be like, oh, whoa, we gotta fix this, or it's like, but they'll be like, oh, that's okay, you can't help that. But if you cry, sometimes it feels like people
are so jarred by it, and after you've experienced like the most painful thing internally, like you just don't give a shit about that stuff anymore. I mean, I didn't care. I'd be walking the Skyway, and something would remind me of Aaron, and I would start crying, and people would be staring at me, and I just wanted to be like, what? Like, just let me like be a hot mess. Like, it's not a big deal.
Just
but
pick fights.
yeah,
Like,
exactly.
problem.
I did get a little angry just because again, there was really no one that I knew that had experienced such a close form of loss. And if people lost a grandparent and they would be sobbing, I'd be like, your fucking grandparent was like 91 years old. Like my brother was 28, and that's not fair. That's not fair. And I get that. But and I still think that way too, like, I just read today that Victor from The Young and the Restless is so out there, that he was
Wait, he
diagnosed
died?
with cancer. He has cancer, and people, I don't know if I read it on Twitter or what, people are like, oh my God, I just hope I hope, and it's like, yeah, cancer is a terrible, and you saw it, like it's a
Yeah.
terrible disease, but this dude is in his 80s and he's been like a multimillionaire his whole life. Like, and it's not fair. It's not fair. And I recognize that, but it just doesn't compare to a loss of someone that's so young and had so much life ahead of them. And if you told me that Aaron was in a better place, like you better run and hide, because I was like ready to like throw in a jab cross hook at anyone that told me that, like, okay, no, I don't care. Like he should be here. I'm here. Parents are still here. He should be here, and that maybe that's comforting for you, but like keep it to yourself. Like nobody wants to hear that when it comes to like, especially a young person passing, or like in your case, like someone dying of like a deadly, terrible disease. Like,
Yeah.
it's
I
so minimized.
Yeah, I think they mean well, but like, path to hell is paved with good intentions kind of thing. Because it's just like,
Mhm.
well, also, one of my friends is a writer, and I was like 22 or something when she says I'm 37 now, so it's been years, but it really stuck with me. She talked about how she always thought that idea of talking about someone in an afterlife, that being comforting, she always thought that was silly, not because she didn't personally have thoughts either way if there was an afterlife. It was more how we love people in the concrete detail of who they are here. And like, because and I remember she talked about, oh, my nephew has this like vein on his head, his little bald head that I love so much, like that wouldn't be here. And I just remember like that really like came back up for me when my brother died, and then even again when my dad died. It was like, we don't love people as an abstraction, or like, even if they're in an afterlife, they're not that physical, that we love people in their form here. So even if there
Yes.
is something that doesn't make it better here.
No, I've never heard it explained like that, and it totally makes sense.
It's like, okay, cool, a
I'm still
ghost.
with you. Okay, well, I can't see them, so I don't give a shit. I sound like such a crotchety old man, and I promise that I'm not. I'm just being completely like honest about, and I think that's important because so much of grief is stigmatized, and it shouldn't be. And you should be angry, and you should feel like slighted, and you should feel, pissed off, and because it's not fair, and it's just not the natural order of things. And of course, if we had it our way, we would all like join hands at the end and like jump into the next thing together, at the same time. But like it doesn't work like that. And so it's just never going to be on our time, but it's especially cruel when it's a premature death, like our siblings.
Mhm. No, I think there is something to that. That like, yeah. I'd be interested though. So I don't, I'll have to try and track some people down. I would actually be really interested to talk to siblings that have lost some. Like, I was even thinking of my uncle when I saw him at my dad's funeral, how he looked so sad. I was thinking, oh wow, like if I had had decades more with Coley, would that have made it better in some ways, but worse in others? Like, you've built even
Mhm.
more. And, so
Yeah.
I go back and forth on that. Like, so, so one of the things I would love to do is like find someone older that's like had their sibling their whole life and recently lost them. Like, I wonder how that changes the nature of the grief. That's just like just a thing I've thought about.
Yeah, no, that's a great idea. Yeah, and that just sucks for different reasons.
For those that have like recently lost a sibling, I
Yeah.
guess, is there like advice or things you would say to them, or things you would wish people had said to you when you first lost Aaron?
That's a really good question, because I feel like I still don't know answers to so many things. I will say that, hindsight is 2020, and I would occasionally think back to people that had lost somebody, and then I would just say, the most milk toast thing ever to them, like, let me know if you need anything. Like, don't say that unless, like, no one knows what they need. And of course the intentions are there and they're great, but it's kind of lazy, like, don't say that unless you have like very strong intentions to go there and help them. What I really needed, Colleen, was like, people are just so uncomfortable with griefy feelings because it reminds them that this could happen to them and they don't want to come to terms with that. And I get that. It's like when you're here, you hope for the best every single day of your life, and you don't want bad things to happen, but shit happens and it sucks, and the universe doesn't care, and I just wish that people would have just, I had one friend, two friends actually, that would just let me cry. Like, they didn't offer platitudes, they didn't try to fix, because it's broken, like it's permanently broken. And so they would just let me be a blubbering mess, and there was no judgment, and it was just them hugging me, or just sitting there and like nodding along, like, this fucking sucks, you're right, like, you should be here. And I wish I would have been that person, before everything with Aaron happened, but you don't know what you don't know, you don't know until it happens. So yeah, I mean, push aside your feelings of comfort or your need for comfort and just sit in the sadness with us. Like, that goes the distance. It sucks in the moment maybe, and you feel like you're not doing anything, but it's like, it's not even about doing, it's just the simple act of being there and letting me just be what I need to be in that moment and get to that level that I need to get at. Yeah. So yeah, other than that, I mean, I don't feel like I really have advice. Another thing that I will say as an existentialist, in worst case scenario, like, I remember my parents, if they didn't come home at the given time that they said they'd be home, I'd be sobbing in my room, like, they're dead, they're in the corner of a ditch. Like, that's just how I was that's how I am. And so, you think that if you dream up the worst things that can happen to you, that you might be more prepared. Like exposure therapy, it doesn't prepare you. Like, nothing does. And there's no right or wrong way. Of course, if you're hurting somebody, don't do that. There's really no right or wrong way. There's no solutions. There's no first aid kit. Just let people cry or like scream in your presence, and just be there to listen, to hear them. And don't tell people that their person's in a better place. You keep that information to yourself.
No, I think that's a really good keep that. No, I think that, well, I think too, like, there's like an art too that I'm always trying to figure out with handling when people grieve in ways that aren't just sad, but like anger is a very real thing. And like, I was thinking about how like it was a month after my dad died, I just like snapped at one of my friends, and she had lost her dad, a few years before. And it's like, she goes, look, I know you're having a hard time right now, but do not take it out on me, but I'm here, but do not take it out. And it was like exactly what, and I'm like, and so I'm always like trying to cultivate that mindset to like be able to like set loving boundaries. Like, I think even sitting with someone in their sadness is so important, but also being able to do self-care afterward. I don't know. I think that's like a whole other thing, of teaching people how to have that emotional like toolkit of being able to like handle the spectrum of the grief shit show.
It's a shit show. Like, you don't know if it's going to be a little spark or if it's going to be a full on like fireworks display. Like, you don't know that, but they especially don't know that. So, yeah, being comfortable with the sadness and like you're saying, to your point, like being comfortable with the anger. It's such a stigmatized emotion, but it's such a necessary part of our emotional existence. And we're gonna be pissed off and it's okay. Again, as long as you're being constructive about it, like don't try to, oh, well, just take it down or, calm down a little bit. Like, just don't do that. Unless someone's like throwing glasses at the wall, just don't do that, but yeah, it's not just the sadness, like you're saying, like it's the anger and it's the denial and the confusion, all of that messy stuff that you don't know about or think about until you're in the shit.
Yeah. No, that's real. That's real. Well, I like how you say you don't know what you don't know. Because I think that's pretty common thing too for people is like you don't realize, yeah, how like yeah, I felt very similar when you said like, oh yeah, man, if I could go back, I would have handled when so and so told me that person died, or yeah, but you don't. That's part
Right.
of growing or having life change you.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And in your 20s, you think you're invincible, and death just does not feel like an actual tangible thing.
Mm-hmm.
So when you hear of death, it's like, oh, that sucks. I'm sorry, but you don't understand it. And I feel like as you get older, people just, because we're all getting older and you hear of death more, then it becomes more real. And then you kind of understand to a degree how to navigate it, versus just being in complete denial. But
Yeah.
yeah.
And what as far as like I guess I don't know, like resources or things you'd like to see out there, like um I guess any like thoughts come to mind in terms of what you think would be good to have as far as like either more research or more like artistic things that talk about loss of or anything like that that comes to mind that you think would be or things that you looked for that you couldn't find or you've been looking for that you can't find.
Yeah. Yeah. We had talked about this earlier, but there really isn't any literature out there on secondhand, if that's what people call it, second grief, on sibling loss, or at least nothing that has gone mainstream where you'd find it at, like a Barnes and Noble kind of a place. I feel like that would just be so wildly important and validating. And grief books are great. They really are great. They're especially great. Like there's a lot of like guidebooks, like it's not necessarily how to navigate grief, but it's like, this is going to happen, that's going to happen, blah, blah, blah. But hearing firsthand accounts of other people's loss, for me personally, as a storyteller, like that was a balm for sure. I'm trying to think of any. I guess I could send you the names, Colleen, because I can't think of any books offhand.
Totally.
And I don't know, that's a really good question. I will say that there is a grief center that is in its infancy right now, and it's just absolutely brilliant. It's this woman who's experienced grief in so many different ways, and she had this idea, and it's like the idea got louder and louder and she couldn't ignore it, and now she's really going places. But it's like a full service grief center. I mean, you can go there and not even make an appointment. Like they'll have like a butterfly garden where you can like memorialize your person there, and then they'll have like speakers, and then they have yoga and journaling, and like it's super cool. And they also do all of that technical, like logistical stuff when someone dies. Like they do that for you. Like they will drive groceries to you. They will fill your car up with gas. Yeah, it's pretty amazing. And if, it's a nonprofit. So it's pretty crazy that they're able to do all of this. So that's a great resource just to be aware of, just to know that it's there. It's a nice alternative to, I just feel like it's such a one note space sometimes, like, grief group or no grief group, like, okay, well, what else is there?
Yeah.
Gotta kind of figure it out. I will say this is very niche, Colleen, but I went to a couple of powwows and the emotion is so raw in those ceremonies, and you can be fully yourself. And it sounds weird, but like everyone does their own thing, and they're coming from different places and stages of life. And like, I could just sob, and it felt great. And there was just something so therapeutic. And because you know, and they're singing as they're dancing, but they're like, it's like they're also crying out, and you just feel like you're crying out for your person, you know. And there was just something so beautiful about that. I mean, like I said, it's a very niche thing, and you know, you might have to drive a while to get to one, but I would highly recommend going to at least one. It will move you to tears, and you will leave feeling so much lighter than when you showed up, especially if you're having a shitty grief day.
I think there's a lot of cultures, or a lot of, you know, that understand the need for kind of the visceral release of grief in a
Yes.
better way than certainly we do in like the Midwest and stuff. But like, you know, certain cultures are much more like stuff it down, and other ones
Yes.
get, no, you gotta.
Yes, exactly. You're so right. You're so right. Full body, visceral, like it's like dislodging all of the stuff, and it feels great. The other thing is to like move, like move your body. It's so easy to just become sedentary and just stare at a wall, you know. So I did that a lot, but I found that working out or running, it would release so many trapped emotions that I couldn't even get to by trying to make myself sad, by looking at pictures, watching videos. Like I couldn't even get it out myself. And there was something just so like the movement of the body is such a release. I would work out, and I'd sit in my car, and I would sob my head off.
Mhm.
I wouldn't even try. It would just come. And then I felt great. It was the best full body release. Like,
Yeah.
honestly, it's not just in your head and your heart, it's your whole body. It's like, you know, the body keeps the score like that. There's so much truth to that. That's another great book for people too, that are experiencing, you know, PTSD or forms of trauma in the wake of loss.
As I say, that book is on my shelf because I bought like a stack of, you know, just random books. So I'm like, this looks interesting. That one keeps coming up from like, I feel like from so many areas. I hear people be like, "Oh, body keeps the score." So yeah,
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good one. And don't watch Frozen 2, because I watched that a few months after Aaron died, and I was like, what in the actual hell? Like,
oh no.
I don't know if you saw that, Colleen, but it's like deals with sibling grief at some point, and I was like,
oh no.
I had to like leave the theater for a while. I'm like, I am not emotionally prepared for this, you know. And just be sensitive to your needs, you know, like if you don't want to be sad, then that's okay too, you know, like, and don't feel bad about not wanting to feel bad. Like you still need to be a person in the world, and you don't know how much time you have either, you know. And I just know that if I were the one that was gone and Aaron was just sitting around, you know, being catatonic in his grief, I'd be like, move, smile, laugh, like be a person. You're still here. Like you're still here. I have to constantly remind my mom that. And I know she feels like a part of her has died, and it has, but I constantly have to be like, but you're still here. I'm still here. Dad is still here. You have a grandson, you know, like you still need to count your blessings or whatever, and not feel bad about that. Like we're here for a very short time, and we don't know when our expiration date is. It's all a mystery.
Yeah, well, very true.
Yeah.
I think that is a very solid thought to end on. And was anything else you wanted to add or say before I end the recording portion?
No. I don't think so. I feel like I probably like overshared, and I've taken up a huge chunk of your time. No, but if you want to follow up on anything, let me know. I'll send you the titles of some books that were kind of a crutch during those early days.